Welcome to the Rich Mind Podcast.
Just having a discussion, talking about the Cashflow board game as we wrapped up the end of the last episode, how much of an impact it's had on our lives, Greg. I know it has for me, for my family. It was one of those things that when I was introduced to it, I was like, really, a board game? How can that be anything that is helpful, right? But when you play it, you realize some big things, some big takeaways, some beliefs. You get pushed up. It's really a personal development experience as well, which is why it's so exciting here to talk about it here on the podcast, is that it challenges beliefs, it challenges ideas that you've been taught since you were a child. You may be still believing those things today, but it gives you an opportunity then to push back a little bit, to test. That's the best part of it. It's a game, right? So even if you lose, it challenges you. But if you lose, or if you lose the money, or if you lose the game, it's okay. You just try again. That's why I thought it'd be a lot of fun to just kind of discuss some of the takeaways from playing that game. Any thoughts on the Cashflow board game from your experience?
Yeah, so I've only played it once, and it's been probably 3 or 4 years. I remember playing it during the pandemic virtually with some other friends who are real estate investors as well. My wife was there, so we both played it together as a team. So yeah, I remember it was a fun experience, and like learning the rules and kind of drawing the parallels between the game and real life, and how you make mistakes in the game, you make mistakes in real life, and how to, understand those and be aware of those mistakes to not repeat them in the future. But yeah, it was a real fun experience, but like I said, I've only played it once, so might rely on you a little bit more for the details of the game.
So there are 3 big takeaways that I've learned from the game. I'll also say this, folks, is that it's a lot of fun. It can be a little bit of a time-consuming game. It takes a little bit to play the game, but it can be a lot of fun because you're learning things that you're just discovering. It's it can be super cool. But there are 3 big takeaways that I have had that I try to teach as many people as I possibly can. I'm excited to share those with you here as well. But it really challenges those beliefs. And I'll just get into them, and then we can have a discussion back and forth about it, Greg. And then I know you said or shared that you've got one big takeaway that you had with this experience that you had playing the game before with your wife. I'm excited to get into that as well. Kind of goes along with what we'll talk about today. But the first big takeaway, the first big belief challenge that I had when I first started playing the game was that when you first break into the game, you have the opportunity to pay down your debt. You have the ability to take the capital that you have available to yourself. So basically you have a savings account. And one of the first options that you have is that you have the ability to pay off some of your debt. And the first time I played, that was the first thing I started to do. I started to take what capital I had and started paying down some of this consumer debt, I guess is what I would call it. It's really considered some of that bad debt we talked about at the very end of the last episode. But that was a habit, or that was a belief that I had growing up all the time, right? You always hear, I say you always, and I just mean that in general sense, right? You hear a lot in today's society about paying off your debt and getting out of debt, which I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't. My point is that when you have capital, meaning when you have currency or money in your presence, you need to be paying attention to where that money is going. Once it's gone because you can't get it back. You have to then continue to go to work or with your job or whatever to get more of that capital to invest. And that's kind of the whole idea, is we want to invest in assets and not necessarily just focusing on consumer debt. So that was the big takeaway that I had from the very beginning, was that instead of taking what capital I had, what money I had, and paying down consumer debt, I held on to that capital and began investing in small increments to then build that capital stack, which then allowed me then to invest in bigger assets, which then allowed me to accelerate through the game of becoming financially free, escaping that rat race. Any thoughts on that so far, Greg? Did that make sense to you as far as how I was trying to explain that, or do you have anything to add to any part of that?
Yeah, so that was the exact example that you mentioned, that I took away from that game. So when my wife and I were playing the game, we were playing as, one team, and that example came up, where we had some money and, we were having a discussion, and she said, "Oh, well, let's pay off this debt. I don't want to have debt. It makes me feel, I don't want to have that debt on my balance sheet." So I said, all right, like, let's talk about it. And we were talking about it with other people on Zoom. And they said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Like that kind of thing. And she said, "Yeah, let's just go pay off this debt." So I said, "All right, let's do it." So I clicked the button, and that's the road we went down. I said, "All right, great. Now we don't have that debt, but we're $10,000 less in our savings account. What do we do now? What's our game? What's our
what
game
do we
plan?"
do now?
Yeah.
I love
What's
that.
our game plan? And we're like, okay. So I knew exactly where that decision was going to take us. But like you said, it was a game. It was a learning experience. And, she made the decision. I wanted her to kind of live through that decision to, not make that decision in real life. So when I do carry debt and I explain it to her, she can be like, "Oh, now I get it, because I don't want to lose that money." Like you said, the money is lost forever when you pay off that debt. So there's kind of like that balancing act of carrying some debt, paying some debt off. Just depends on, your big picture, the interest rates, the terms, a lot of things come into play. But that was my big takeaway from playing that game, was that specific example that you mentioned.
Love it. So yeah, a lot of things come into play with that, folks. And if you're listening to us and if you're trying to take some control of your own finances, you've got to really be paying attention to a lot of things Greg just mentioned right there. And one big piece of that is the interest rates, right? So if you're carrying debt, which means you're rolling over debt, you just need to really be paying attention to the interest rate. And the interest rate is nothing more than what it's costing you to carry that debt. And if that interest rate is at a relatively low rate where you can then take that currency, instead of paying off that debt at that current interest rate, and then invest it in something else that can increase or be more, once again, it's that arbitrage piece, right? If you can invest in something to get a higher return than that interest rate that you're paying, that's where you can start making a profit, right? That's where you can start building some potential wealth versus it being just evaporated. Your example there, as far as like paying off that debt, I lived that in real life. I'll never forget. I left a job. I had a little bit of 401k money in an account. I actually honestly wasn't even paying attention back in the day. And when I left the job, I had access to that capital, right? You can get it. I don't remember if I paid a fee. I don't remember how that all worked out. This is many, many years ago, but I wish I would have known this lesson back then, because I took that capital, and my wife had a relatively small, it was a few $1,000s student loan that we were paying nothing for. It wasn't costing us hardly anything in interest back in the day, back in the time. I want to say this was probably close to 20 years ago, maybe even a little bit more. But the point is that I thought, based on this belief that I had, that I should take the capital that I had, it found me, right? It was my money, but I didn't realize I really even had it. So it was almost like, wow, I had received a gift. Here it is. I can do whatever I want with it. And that's kind of the whole point, is that when it's in your hands, you need to know what to do with it based on the outcome that you're looking for. I took that capital and I paid down this debt, which I understand. Yeah, granted, the debt was gone. My $50 a month payment that I was paying on this debt was gone as well. But those thousands of dollars, I don't remember if it was 5, 8, 10, I forget the exact number, but at the time it was a significant amount for us. Young family, I should not have done that. As soon as I did it, very soon after the fact, I realized, like, what in the world am I doing? That money's gone and I'll never get it back. So I could have done so many different things with that, invested in so many different things, but whether it been learning about a business, whether it been learning about investing in real estate of some kind or something like that. I could have invested it in myself, right? To get some more education. There's so many things I could have done with that capital. But that's the big takeaway from the game, is that you have the opportunity at the very beginning. The numbers are a little smaller because it's a game, but you have that first opportunity right away from at the very beginning. And if you fall into that, I call it a trap. I don't know if that's too harsh of a word or not, but if you fall into that belief system that you need to get out of this consumer debt without understanding interest rates, understanding where you could invest instead, that's the big takeaway from the beginning part of the game. So I appreciate you sharing that so far with that, Greg.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into the core objective of the game is to escape the rat race, right? And you do that by building passive income that exceeds your expenses, which is, like you talked about, that's the principle that we can all apply in real life. And yeah, so that's the whole point of the game. And I think what you did in your real life, what we did in the game, we did the opposite, right? We made a mistake. We realized we made a mistake, but we kind of get into that of, building that passive income when it exceeds your expenses, then, you're out of that rat race. And that's the whole point of the cash flow game.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so much fun. So first off, folks, I want to definitely encourage you to go out there and find the game. You can go to richdad.com. You can go to Amazon. I'll have a link in the show notes. You can go to Amazon and grab a copy, or the physical board game. You can do that. They actually have a digital version now. You can just play it on your computer, and I believe it's free. You might have to sign in or opt in with an email or something like that, but it's free, and you can just learn a lot of the concepts that we're discussing here today. I'll go into a couple more of the big takeaways for myself, but yeah, I just want to definitely head over to richdad.com and at least play the digital version. You'll be surprised. You'll learn pretty quickly how it challenges your beliefs. But one of the second pieces that I wanted to share, one of the big takeaways, was that at first, when I first started playing the game, so I'd gotten over the idea that I needed to just basically pay down all of my debt. The next big aha moment that I had was amplifying or increasing my ability to buy assets, because that's the whole point of the game. You're buying assets, so the passive income that you receive from your assets is going to outpace your expenses, so you escape the rat race. That's kind of the whole premise of the game. To buy assets. So you get opportunities to buy assets throughout the game. And some of that, when I first started playing, I thought that I needed to just use my own money that I had saved up. So throughout the game, you earn some income based on whatever job you have. But I waited and waited and waited and waited to purchase those assets because I didn't think that I had the ability to leverage or use leverage to buy those assets. That was a small-minded lack thinking that, once again, understanding good debt versus bad debt. This is well before when I first started playing the game. I didn't understand really the concept, but that's really where this comes in, is that when you are able to borrow for assets that continue to cash flow, that's where, once again, you can accelerate your wealth, accelerate your ability to buy assets, to increase your personal balance sheet, to really get yourself on this path of financial abundance. And once again, hopefully I've worded that well, Greg. What are your thoughts so far on that piece?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what the game, expresses as well. And, the good debt versus bad debt, we can definitely dive into that. And I know, you mentioned last episode a little bit about your primary residence, how it's, some people think it's a good debt. Some people think it's a bad debt. I kind of have a different opinion. I think it's both, depending on how you look at it, but we can kind of dive into that a little bit. But I know Robert Kiyosaki thinks it's bad debt because it is basically, a payment they have to make every month. So I'll just kind of get into it now, but I kind of agree with that for sure, that it is bad debt in the short term because you do have to work or, create money or create a business to pay your mortgage every month. But the reason I say it might be a good debt is for the long-term possibilities with appreciation, right? And I've experienced this, luckily, in a good time. I started real estate investing in 2010. So I like to say 2010, from 2010 to 2020, life was great. You really couldn't make too many mistakes in real estate investing. So thankfully, I was in that time frame there. But yeah, so the good debt versus bad debt for the primary residence, when we moved from Arizona to Florida, we sold our primary residence there, and it had gone up quite a bit just because of the economy and the markets and everything. So from that perspective, it was a good debt to have because we basically got paid to live in that house. And on the back end, and I should say this, we're not, tax professionals or financial planners or anything like that. So we're just talking, and this is just information. But when we sold that house in Arizona, we did not have to pay any taxes on that gain because we lived in that house for the last 2 of the 5 years. So on the exit, it was great for us. That was great debt for us to hold long term, but I definitely agree on the short term how it could be considered bad debt. So I would say it's kind of both, depending on the time frame that you're looking at. What are your thoughts or pushback or anything on there?
Yeah, so I do things differently, right? As I've mentioned in the podcast before, I've pretty much a contrarian with a lot of the mainstream normal way folks look at things, and I don't know if they're right or they're wrong. So as you mentioned, we're not advisors, we're not professionals, we're not anything. We're just a couple of guys talking about things in our own life. So here's the way I look at that debate, because to me it's it's just a decision. You just need to decide which side of that you fall. The argument that I would have is don't just believe something just because somebody told you this is the way to do it. Now, yeah, that's probably my biggest pushback to that, is that I'm not saying that's right or I'm not saying that's wrong. Here's the thing for me was that I decided when I began on my journey from the financial education piece that I was going to be an active participant, which meant that I needed access to as much capital as I possibly could. The issue that I had was that most of my wealth or most of the capital that I had available was tied up in this residence that I was living in. Now, you can either borrow that money out with a HELOC or, you know what I mean, get a loan towards, use it as collateral to get a loan towards it. But I felt like that was clunky. I did that. I'm not saying I didn't do that. I did do that for a while. But what I've realized is that what I really want are, so going back to the good debt, bad debt argument, I want as much good debt as I possibly can, debt where I'm not having to pay for that debt out of my own pocket. So I want to stack up properties that other folks are helping me pay down for, right? But the residence that I live in, it doesn't have to be, I don't have to have debt on it. I can take that capital that I had in the equity of that house and invest it in other places. I'm not using that capital or that equity to consume. I'm not using it to go on vacation. I'm not using it to buy cars. I'm not using it to do, there again, invest in bad debt. I'm using it to invest in good debt or good assets that, yes, I have the same amount of debt, if not a little bit more, in residential properties. They're just not in the properties that I currently live in. How does that sound, or what does that make you think of when I describe it in that way? Greg, any thoughts at all?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I've done exactly what you've described there. I have a HELOC on, my primary, and I've taken money out of it, like you said, not to go on vacation or to buy, a new car or anything, but it's to buy assets that are going to produce more money. And I've done that with rental properties in the past as well. So that's a great way to do that. I know, like I said, back in, from 2010 to 2020, it was real easy because, I bought my first house for $120,000, and then all of a sudden it was worth like $200,000. Then I can cash out, refi, and then still have that property cash flow. But all of a sudden now I have an extra $50,000, $60,000 in my bank account. Okay, cool. Let me go buy another cash flowing property. So it was real easy when the market was appreciating, cash out refis. Today's market, it's a little bit different of a story, so it's not as easy. But yeah, I love that strategy. I've done it plenty of times in the past, and hopefully we'll do that in the future when the market, kind of dictates that.
Yeah. So playing the cash flow board game, it kind of gets you in the idea or the mindset of looking for assets and not being afraid of leverage. So within the game, that's kind of, I want to go back to the takeaway, was that you have the ability to borrow within the game. I forget, I think the interest rate is 10%. Anyways, I don't want to get into the details of that, but the point is that you have the ability to borrow to buy assets inside of the game. And at first, when I first started playing the game, I was afraid to do that. And that's what I want to encourage you, the listener today, is that through your financial education, through getting educated, following other folks, even beyond the Rich Mind podcast, going out and following Robert and getting educated from the tax advice, right? So Tom Wheelwright is his tax advisor, right? I've learned so much just from listening to them. Kenny McElroy, if you want to learn about real estate investing, is a great resource to learn some financial education to help you bridge that gap of understanding, right? The good debt versus bad debt and how to use leverage in a positive way. But yeah, when I first started the game, I was afraid of leverage. And it's not that I'm not afraid of it now, because it's one of those things it can be negative, right? It can hurt you. I know some folks sometimes that will get out over their skis with some leverage. They'll over leverage an asset that may be an asset today, but quickly turn into a liability, meaning it turns into some negative cash flow very quickly. And that leverage piece, like I said, it can be a great thing when it's working well, but it can also be a negative for sure. That's where you've got to make sure you're paying attention. So once again, we are not tax professionals. I just want to make sure everybody understands that we are not. We are just two guys talking about some things that we've done in the past. So make sure you get some advice from some professionals out there when you're moving forward in your investing career. So Any more thoughts before we head on to that next piece, takeaway for myself?
Yeah, the one thing I was going to ask from the game, I believe that the Cashflow game, it does include collaborating with others to work together on deals. Am I thinking of a different game?
Yeah, so you draw cards, which are deals. You can big or small deals, and then you have the ability to even sell those deals. So you can make a deal across the table. So if you're playing like with a person or let's say 4 people, right? You can draw a card. You might not have the ability to use that card, or it might not be the right opportunity you need. You have then the ability to sell it. You can say, for $1,000 or for whatever you make up the own terms yourself, which is kind of fun. That for X amount, I will sell this deal to you, and then they have the ability to execute it from that point, right? Come up with a down payment, whatever it is for that asset. So yeah, that's a big piece of it as well. But that's, once again, that's as you get further on and learn more about the game after you played a few times, that's where it even becomes a lot more fun for sure.
Yeah, so that's a big takeaway too, is just to bring that aspect of the game into real life where you can collaborate with others. It's not always competition. It's, hey, I have this deal, but I don't know how to execute it. I don't have the money to execute it. Who do I know that, has a little bit more knowledge? Maybe I can partner with them. They can show me the ropes. So always keep that collaboration piece in mind when you're looking at, deals and even deals in real life. That's the whole point, is we're bringing the game to you guys in real life.
Your team, folks, we talk about that, your partners, your friends, your relationships. Greg and I, honestly, right before we hit record on this episode, we were talking about we were brainstorming a potential deal, right? Kind of talking about it. What do you think? How would I do that? How would I structure it? What would be the benefit? Just all of those, that was just a dialogue that literally he and I were just having 22 minutes ago as of this recording. And that's what it's all about, right? The collaboration piece is something that when you first get started out and you're trying to build some wealth for yourself, sometimes you're trying to do it all by yourself. You're trying to just stay within this little bubble, this perceived safety. And that's what we're encouraging you to do, which kind of goes right along into the last big takeaway for myself of the game, is that it's courage. It really helps you develop some courage to take some action that you may not have done in normal life. That's the best part. It's just a game. So you can go bankrupt in the game, and that's fine because you're just going to close it up and come back and play it again, right? You don't have to, you can take some risks on some different things and test some theories. As I mentioned just a second ago, Greg and I were kind of brainstorming on a potential theory. Well, that's real life. So we need to think through that a little bit more, right? What's going to be good? What's going to be bad? But in the game, you can take a test or a chance, right? You can say, okay, I am going to over leverage on this property and maybe it pays off. Or I'm going to be a little bit more conservative and let's see how that works, how much longer it takes to win the game. That's the best part. It's a game and you can just play it at your pace, push yourself, draw up some courage to take some risks. When I see folks now play for the first time, a lot of times that's what I see, is that they're really conservative with investing in things. And it's play money. It's not even real money, right? It's monopoly money, basically, is what it is. But that was another big takeaway, is the amount of courage it allowed me to have as I was branching out into the real world and taking real action. As I mentioned, I'm trying to play the game in real life. As I've discovered the secrets of winning the game, it's like, okay, how can I relate what I'm learning and start doing it? And that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I would say, or my takeaway, just basically based on what you just mentioned, was knowing your own risk factor. Not everybody needs to take 100% risk all the time because it's going to cause you stress and anxiety. And, even if it works out, you might be stressing out the whole time until the deal closes. And the whole point is to escape the rat race, but it's not to escape the rat race tomorrow or in 30 days. Everybody has their own situation, timelines. If you're dealing with a husband, wife, or a partner, that plays into effect. So a lot of factors come into play, but really understand, be aware of your risk factor, and how that can change over time and how your portfolio it might build. It might give you a little bit more courage and confidence to take a little bit more risk. So a lot of factors go into it, but definitely be aware of your risk factors and how that changes in situations and over time.
Love it. So that's where I just want to bring that to your attention, folks. As I mentioned, I have it on my little display here that I'm always showing on the video portions of the podcast. And I just wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper into the game itself, how it's impacted me, and then just encourage you to go out there and at least play the digital version, right? As I've said, it might require an email or something like that, but it's free to play. Go out there and try it. See how it pushes you to in your challenges, your beliefs, right? Your ideas. Develop some courage for yourself. Develop some theories, right? Once you learn, there's a pattern to winning the game, and once you learn that pattern, and then you can then take that pattern out into real life, you can start making some significant positive changes in your financial future. That's when it starts to be a lot of fun. So I just want to encourage you to go out there and go to richdad.com. The digital version would be great. It's just called Cashflow board game. Or then I think I bought mine off Amazon. I have a link in the show notes. You can grab a physical copy of the game as well. It's a lot of fun at playing it with other folks too. We try to do as a family at least once a year. We were doing it a lot more often than when we first started playing it, or when we first received it. But we try to play at least once a year. It's a lot of fun. So I think we're going to wrap this one up here today, Greg. Appreciate you folks sticking around with us here so far in this episode. In the next episode, we're going to talk about be, do, have. Have you heard that phrase or that string of words before?
I have, yeah, but I'm really curious on how, your take is going to be on it, and then obviously what we're going to come up with together.
So in my study of myself, and then the study when I'm just observing other people, I think people have that phrase or those three words. I think they've got that a little bit backwards. And how when I've tried to put them in the right order, once again, I start to see things in a different way. I'm able to achieve things in a greater fashion. And I want to share those ideas and concepts with you. So be, do, have. We're going to dive into a little bit more of that on the next episode of the Rich Mind Podcast. So Greg and I appreciate you being here today. Appreciate your time and attention. If you wouldn't mind leaving us some feedback, go out to a podcast platform of your choice, doesn't matter, and leave us a review. We'd greatly appreciate that. You can always connect with us at info@richmind.co with any questions, concerns. If you're having some challenges of your own with your financial situation or whatever. As we've mentioned, we're not professionals, but at the same time, we wouldn't mind offering any advice that we possibly can give you to help you in your journey, right? To escape the rat race. That's kind of the whole point. We're trying to achieve financial freedom. And we can all do that together collectively, like we talked about, as a little bit trying to help each other. And that's what we want to do here on the Rich Mind Podcast. So go out there, focus on being great. We appreciate your time and attention today, and we look forward to coming back with the next episode again very soon. Until then, bye now.
Thank you for joining us today on the Rich Mind Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and share it with someone you know. Also, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite platform and never miss an episode. One last thing, don't ever forget that your mind is the first place where wealth is created. Keep dreaming big, take action, and together, let's build wealth, a legacy, and a life we love.